Hi, welcome. Today we've got Cy Persinger, 2021 first baseman, right-hand pitcher from Midland Trail High School, heading down to West Virginia Wesleyan to be a Bobcat and work with Randy Tenney and the boys there in the Mountain East Conference. Appreciate you spending some time with us.
Hey, well, thank you for having me.
Sure. So for those who aren't familiar with Cy Persinger, give us a little background. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your family.
Yeah, so kind of like you've already said, I play first base, pitch. I go to Midland Trail High School on my way to West Virginia Wesleyan next fall. Some of the things that I like to do whenever I'm not playing baseball, I like to be outside a lot. I like to hunt and fish, just kind of be active all the time. So that's kind of like the breakdown on me.
Okay, great. So what are, let's take your first baseman and we'll do pitcher separate. So as a first baseman, what are some of the measurables that you have that allowed or that excited coaches to come see you play?
Yeah, so obviously, as a first baseman, you're going to want to hit for power, and you're going to want to have a big frame so that you can have a lot of catch radius whenever you're kind of playing the bag. And so what you want to do, you want to have, high exit velocity. You want to be able to hit for power. You want to be able to hit doubles. It's kind of some of the things that I like to focus on as a hitter that I feel have made me more recruitable as a hitter is I like to focus on, one, hitting for power and being able to score guys that are in scoring position. And so, if I've got guys on second and third, I want to make sure that I can score those guys. And, I'm not a real fast guy. I'm not going to steal a lot of bags. And so I want to put myself in a better position whenever I'm done hitting. I don't want to be on first. I want to be on second or better.
So what are some of the numbers you've put up? What's been your progress? Do you remember back like exit velocity, like how far back you started tracking that and kind of where you're at now? So guys got to get a gauge for, where they're at.
Yeah. So kind of independently, whenever I started tracking that, I started to track that in like 8th grade. My dad was actually my middle school baseball coach. And so part of our practice we would do pull downs to see how hard we could throw. And then we would actually do exit velocity off the tee. And so in middle school, I wasn't really strong or anything. So I was kind of sitting around, upper 70s in that area, kind of touch 80 a little bit. And then as I've gotten stronger and everything, we're sitting in like the 90s now on the exit velocity.
Excellent. So as a pitcher, what are some of the measurables that did you get recruited as a first baseman pitcher, or was it both? How did that work?
Yeah, so most schools that I talked to, they were kind of interested in both.
So what were some of the measurables as a pitcher? What's your best pitch? What'd you hit the velo at, and how did that progress?
Yeah, so obviously as a pitcher, the thing that's going to kind of start a lot of conversations for you, kind of get your foot in the door is your velo. If you're not sitting too high on the radar gun, you're going to have to, put up some really good games, have some really good off-speed pitches to kind of get in those conversations. But if you can get that velo up there, if you can be sitting, mid 80s, you can start off a lot of conversations just with that, just being able to show that you can throw hard, because you can develop everything else, but it's kind of hard to develop velocity. And so I kind of I top out around like 84. And so I'm right there in that mid 80s range, trying to gain a little bit more before I get up to Wesleyan, so I can compete a little bit earlier up there. But other than that,
How did that progress? So where were you, and how has it been a late growth spurt? Do you remember that first time you hit 80 miles an hour? How did that progression happen?
Yeah, so kind of as it's gone, it's kind of been like a steady growth that I've seen since right around the same time that I started doing exit velocity. I started doing like a driveline baseball workout every day since 7th grade. And since that time, I've slowly gained, 3 or 4 miles per hour every off season. And so at the time, whenever I started, I was in 7th grade, I was sitting around like 68 miles an hour. And since then, I've just continually gained velocity. Some years whenever I was getting stronger, going through a lot of changes, I had bigger velocity gains, but I'm still continuing to see those gains as I continue to lift, as I continue to get stronger.
So Midland Trail, that's a single A school, correct?
Right.
So what's for so guys that are out there at a single A school, what are some of the hurdles you have to overcome at a single A school, and how did you do that?
Yeah, so I think that it was especially hard for me because in Midland Trail, we're not really known for our baseball program. We've had a lot of years where our baseball program wasn't very successful, and then these last couple of years, our baseball program has seen a lot of growth, and so that's some of the hurdles that you see is you're not going to get a lot of recruitment based on your high school team. You're not going to get a lot of recruitment based on your performance for your high school team or what your high school coach may say about you. And so it's really important for those guys to be able to get out during the summer, get out during the fall, get out during the off season and be seen, get more exposure from playing with teams like the Appalachian Aces that have so many guys with so much talent that are playing, that have so many connections. And that was one of the things that was really a game changer for me, was getting set up with the Aces and I played in the South with the Carolina Rockies this summer. And then this fall, I came up and played for Josh Kuykendall and the Aces. And that was a game changer for me because I went from getting, very little exposure to no exposure playing high school ball and playing even American Legion during the summer to coming up and playing in front of college scouts every game that I played in. And so that's one of the most important things for guys that come from single A schools, smaller schools, and in general, just anybody, is being able to get out and get that exposure that they need to be able to give themselves a realistic chance.
So there's a lot of negativity or low times in the recruiting process. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of those times where maybe you weren't getting a lot of interest and you maybe had some doubt creep in and you're like, man, this is tough. And how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of times during my recruiting process that I had, no offers, no real interest. I mean, at one time I thought that I was going to be a football player. And so, baseball was always my dream. Like I always wanted to play baseball in college, but at the time I had no offers for baseball and I was starting to see, some real interest come in for football. And so as I started to talk to those football coaches and I was not talking to any baseball coaches, in my mind, I was like, well, this might be the route that God has set out for me. This might be the way that I end up going through. And so over time, it was just kind of low for me seeing, that I had no real interest in the sport that I really, really have a passion for.
So what were the 2 or 3 things that you did that kind of you mentioned playing with the Aces? You can talk about that again, but what were the 2 or 3 things you did to kind of maybe get through that log jam and actually start getting some action on the recruiting side?
Yeah, so some of the main things that I did was I started to play against some, better competition. And so once you play against that better competition, I went south and played a lot of ball this summer, and I was seeing guys that were throwing harder. I was seeing better hitters when I pitched. And so overall, that made me a better baseball player, and it made me more recruitable whenever I got in front of those scouts. And so, but the biggest thing for me was playing for the Aces and having, Josh Kuykendall on my side. Whenever you've got Josh on your side, he's got so many connections. He's got so many different people that he knows that he can work with that it's really a game changer for you. And then another thing that kind of helped me was I worked out with Jeremy Cummings a couple times. So Jeremy, he's also got a whole lot of connections in the state and, even outside of the state. And so he really helped me also. He put in some phone calls for me. And those 2 guys, Jeremy and Josh, those 2 guys, whenever they call and make a phone call for you, those are 2 guys that people are going to listen to what they have to say.
Excellent. So what do you think was your big break with Wesleyan? What happened that kind of got you on their radar?
Yeah, so I was kind of looking back at that the other day. I was kind of wondering the same thing myself, and I kind of went through and looked, and it was just a couple days after I played my first tournament with the Aces, I had a message from Coach Deganey, and he told me that he had saw me online. And so the first time that he ever saw me, he actually saw me playing online in a live stream for the Aces. And like, that's another thing that's so great about the Aces, is that they make it so easy to get your game footage out there. And so they were putting it out there for us on that live stream. And so we had coaches watching that live stream, watching us, but it's also so easy that we were able to go back and, cut up that film ourselves and make it in. So we've got that highlight tape so that we can send it out to any coach we talk to.
Great. So as you walk through that process, what were some of the mistakes you made? Looking back, what would you do differently?
Probably the main mistake that I made was overall is that I started the process just way too late. And so, having the people around me that were there to kind of guide me, they had trouble guiding me through the process because it had been so long since they had went through their recruiting process that they, everything had changed. And so it's a completely different process than it is right now. And so as we went through that, it was kind of just a filling out process, just trying to figure out today's recruiting process. And so by the time we got that figured out, and by the time we figured out where you need to be to get exposure, what kind of tournaments and what kind of showcases you need to be to get that kind of exposure that you really need, it was the summer going into my senior year. And that's when I started to play really serious travel ball, really serious, showcase baseball. And that's when I started to get those real serious talk from coaches.
So tell me about how that communication process happens. Is it phone call, then it goes to email or text, or what's the order, and how did it happen for you?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure about how it happens for everybody else, but for me personally, the way that it worked was almost every single coach that I talked to this summer, once I got a little bit older, it always started out with a Twitter DM. It always started out with them finding me online somehow. And so they would find me online and then kind of shoot me a message there through Twitter. And we would kind of have that first initial conversation there in the Twitter direct messages. And then it would kind of end with a transfer or giving each other our phone numbers there. And then it would move on. We would text a couple of times, have a couple of conversations over text. And then that would progress as it got more serious into some phone calls, and then later on into, like campus visits and stuff like that.
So you mentioned they found you on social, on Twitter. What kind of things when did you start your Twitter account? Did you use your personal account? Did you start a new one just for recruiting? And what were kind of some of the things that you posted out there?
Yeah, so I use my personal account for it. I know a lot of guys, they do kind of make a separate account for their recruiting, but I used my personal one. I was just kind of smart about what, you put out there all the time, which is always good. You want to watch what you're putting on Twitter. You want to watch your footprint on social media. And so I was kind of always smart about what I was putting out and everything, even though, it's my personal account. I want to have a good impression on those coaches whenever they first look at it. And so it was my personal stuff but it mostly consisted of baseball film. And so, it was mostly game film, getting those at bats that I took during games, getting that mound time in, getting those, if I had a couple strikeouts during the game, I would kind of put those into a video and put it out there so that whenever those coaches got on my account, that would be the first thing that they would see whenever they go through my feed.
So that's not an easy process. That takes a little bit of time, and some people want it to be easy. But tell me about that process of taking the footage, cutting it up. But I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah, so you go through all that game footage. You've got all those at bats that you take, and then it kind of comes down to like, what are your strengths and what do you want to see, or what do you want coaches to see whenever they get on your profile? So like, you may have some pitches that were strikeout pitches and everything, but they've got the radar gun in the video and you really weren't throwing that hard on those pitches, but you've got some other pitches where you threw a little bit harder. So you kind of got to get a balance between, you know, your best pitches where your velocity was up and everything. You want to get some strong base hits in there, you know, stuff like that. But you gotta make it, you know, like no coach is going to want to sit there for 20 minutes and watch 20 seconds in between every pitch. And so you want to get that good and clean, get it all cut up and kind of edit it in there so it's easy to watch while you're kind of looking through that video.
Did you have a YouTube channel or post anything on YouTube for links, or did you just use basically Twitter?
No, I didn't use YouTube at all. I just kind of did videos on Twitter.
Okay. So looking back, can you remember when you felt like you started the recruiting process and what the first thing you did was? Was it sending an email out?
Yeah.
Was it creating a profile somewhere?
Yeah, so probably whenever I started kind of getting into the recruiting process was I started to go to some camps and send out some emails my freshman and sophomore year. I kind of got into some camps in state and out of state, kind of trying to get some exposure, but none of those things ever really amounted to anything because I wasn't at the skill level at that time to where I would get the necessary attention at those camps to be able to make those into anything that would matter. And so I was kind of going to those camps and I was sending some emails, but my emails, you know, I didn't have a recruiting profile to put in with those emails. And so they didn't get me a lot of attention. And so I didn't really seriously start into the recruiting process, didn't really get into it very deep until just this past year, whenever I was going into my summer of my senior year, just kind of getting into that competitive travel ball where those coaches would really see me. And that was the first time that I really got serious interest.
What did you find the recruiting process, like the rules and everything, a little confusing? And would it have helped to have had like a little bit better recruiting education early on, maybe coming out of middle school or freshman year?
Oh yeah, probably 100%, you know, because, you know, there's so many different rules and so many different ways that everything can work, even just between the different divisions in the NCAA, and then you've got NAIA and all these different rules. And so it was kind of hard because you think you've got an understanding and then you find out you really don't have that good of an understanding. So I feel like it probably would have helped me a lot to get into some of that rules education and, you know, learning about the recruiting process from an earlier age. That probably would have saved me a lot of stress this past year because I was going through, you know, what most guys make into a 4-year process. I did that in like 6 months. And so everything moved pretty fast for me.
So tell me about the role of your high school coach and maybe your travel team coaches in this process.
Yeah, so my high school coach wasn't very involved in the process, but the reason for that is because between my sophomore and junior year, we actually went through a coaching change at Midland Trail. And so whenever coronavirus kind of canceled our season there, we haven't really had a chance to go through any of that recruiting talk with him. And so we didn't really have a chance to get him involved in the process, but travel coaches and trainers really made the whole difference for me because, you know, I got into the summer playing with Josh Kuykendall's Aces, and that was all the difference for me. That was what really made the difference in my recruiting process, was being able to say that I played for the Aces, because even personally, whenever I was on visits with coaches, there was one coach that told me, he said, you know, if I get an ace, I know that that's going to be a good baseball player because I know that Josh doesn't have guys that aren't solid on his baseball team. So just being able to say that you've played for those teams gives you just an amount of being more recruitable because you've got you've kind of proved yourself by being able to make and be able to play for one of those teams.
So other than coaches, who else was instrumental in your recruiting process?
Yeah, so probably one of the most instrumental people in my recruiting process was actually one of my football coaches. His name is Jeremy Moore. And so he kind of always tried to talk to me about playing football, wanted me to play football, but in the end, he wanted me to follow my dream and do whatever I wanted to do. And so he was supportive and kind of he went through the recruiting process as a football player, a little bit less long ago than a lot of, my parents had. And so he kind of helped me out with that. But from a recruiting standpoint, football is a lot different than baseball. And so, he helped me out as best as he could. And he also just encouraged me to follow my dreams and what they were. Another person that helped me out a lot is my brother, Bo. And so he's actually my younger brother, but a lot of guys think that, if you're a good baseball player, you're just going to get all this interest. And so a lot of the videos that I made, they're with Bo throwing to me, or they're with Bo catching me while I'm pitching. And he was the guy that was always there with me whenever I was training. We're in the gym, we're throwing during the winter, we're hitting during the winter, we're lifting during the winter. And that's really the work that it takes to be able to get through the recruiting process, because if you don't, you can have all the connections that you want, but you've also got to be talented, and you got to have the work ethic. And so he's probably one of the guys that also helped me the most during my recruiting process.
So did you ever use like a recruiting service, like to post a profile or send out emails or use their network, that kind of thing?
No, I never used any recruiting services.
What about a player profile? Did you ever have like an online player profile somewhere, or maybe a hard copy player profile that you sent out to coaches?
Yeah, I never really made like a player profile online. As I would kind of go through sending out those emails, I would just kind of send like a biography of myself to those coaches.
So let's talk a little bit about the communication process. So what does a typical, when you say it normally started with a DM from a coach, so they're sending you a direct message, what do those messages say? Is it long? Is it short? How's that start?
So usually it's not a very long kind of message. Usually it's pretty short, just kind of introducing themselves, kind of just asking if you've thought about being interested in playing college baseball at the next level, or playing baseball at the next level. And so they'll kind of try to get to know you early on in those messages. They'll try to have a conversation with you. A lot of times they'll talk about academics right there at the beginning of those conversations, but usually it's kind of that coach just trying to get to know you as a person, just trying to get to know you as an athlete and as a student, because overall those are the things that they're recruiting you for, because those coaches, they have a program that themselves that they're trying to build. And so they're trying to make sure that you're going to be a good fit for the program and that you're going to be able to contribute to the baseball team.
Sure. So what's a typical phone call like? How long does it take? What are some of the tougher questions that coaches ask on the phone calls?
Yeah, so usually the phone calls that I was on, they weren't too long of phone calls. Sometimes they'll be around 30 to 45 minutes. That might be like a long time for some guys, but it wasn't too bad for me. And, the coaches that I talked to, they were all really great people. And so I really didn't have a lot of, tough questions that they were asking me, because they were just trying to, get a feel for who you are and get a feel for kind of what you stand for. A lot of the ways that you prepare to play baseball. That was one of my main focuses during some of those first conversations, was kind of how they prepare for baseball and how they train, because a lot of guys kind of overlook that in the recruiting process. But the way that I train, I like to do a lot of drive line baseball, hitting and pitching stuff. And so it was I've seen growth using those workouts. And so it was important for me to find a place where I would fit kind of using pitching and hitting philosophy, but also in the way that they work out. And so that was an important conversation that I had with those guys, and they were all, straightforward with me, because we've got a lot of coaches in West Virginia that are more progressive, and then we've got some coaches in West Virginia that are more traditional, and there's no problem with either one of those. I just felt like a better fit for me would be one of those more progressive teams to where I can kind of continue to do those workouts that I've seen more growth under.
So tell me about the offers. How did you get an offer? Was it on a visit, phone call? Was it in person? Did they write it down? Was it numbers? Tell me about the offers you got.
Yeah, so most of the offers that I got were kind of over the phone. You know, it would kind of start out, we'd get to the point where I was invited to the campus visit. And so we would come on campus, talk about it, and we would kind of talk and we would part ways. But then a couple weeks later, after kind of keeping in contact with the coach, continuing sending them some more videos, you know, throwing bullpens or taking BP or some more game footage, then it would kind of turn into, you know, I want to go ahead and make an offer to you.
So did they describe it in terms of percentages? They give you, like, I mean, you don't have to talk specifics, but was it dollar amounts? Was it pretty detailed? Did you know exactly what you were getting, or was it a little unclear?
Yeah, so all of the offers that I got were, you know, cut and dry. They were all clear, all straightforward with what I would be getting.
Talk a little bit, because you also got football offers. Talk a little bit about the difference between the football recruiting process and those offers and the baseball recruiting process.
Yeah, so for me personally, as somebody that came from a small single A school, those two recruiting processes were completely different. And so as a football player, a lot of times what you're going to be recruited based on comes from your high school. And so those coaches are coming to see your high school games, they're watching your high school film, they're talking to your high school coach, and it's all revolving around how you do in your high school competition. But baseball, for me, was a completely different beast. And so as a high school baseball player, none of what I did held a whole lot of weight, because my school isn't known for baseball, and the teams that we play weren't considered very good competition. And so a lot of what I did in high school baseball wasn't really used during my recruiting process. And so a lot of my recruiting process came from my travel teams, came from my summer teams. And so it was kind of a really big difference for me between the football and the baseball sides.
So as you're looking at the different offers, you got some football offers, you got baseball. What were the conversations like as you were thinking about, how am I going to make this process and make this decision? Was it easy? Did you have a really good feel, or was it a little bit up in the air?
Yeah, so from the beginning, I kind of knew that I wanted to keep all my options on the table. And so I kind of kept those football offers for as long as I could. And I kept all my baseball offers for as long as I could. You know, I didn't want to burn any bridges too early in case I wanted to come back to those offers later. And so I always knew from the beginning, though, that I was kind of more interested in playing baseball, because I've always had just a different love for baseball. You know, I love football, but I just have a different kind of love for baseball. And so as I went through my process, I just kind of just took it a day at a time. And then that day that I took my campus visit to Wesleyan, it was kind of like I just knew that that was the place for me. I just felt like when I got on campus, I had some, you know, hitting and pitching philosophy conversations with Coach Signee. And we kind of had those conversations while I was there. We talked about the kind of workouts that they do. We talked about the type of school that it is, and just the campus is so beautiful, and kind of the program that I feel like they're trying to build over there. It just felt like that was going to be the place where I could grow the most not only as a baseball player, but as a person. And so I felt like once I got there, the decision was pretty easy for me.
So how did that go? Did you call them up? Did you commit right when they made the offer? Did you think about it for a little bit? Tell me about the actual commitment side of it.
Yeah, so it was probably a couple weeks after I made that campus visit, and I was telling some of my close friends, I was like, you know, I really like Wesleyan. Like, I think I'm going to commit pretty soon. But then it was like a couple days later, I got a text from Coach Signee, and it was like, "Can you talk?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can talk." And so he called me, and that was actually whenever he made that offer to me. And so it was at that moment I knew, I was like, I want to be somewhere where I'm going to be, the coach is going to be willing to bet on me. Like he's going to be willing to count on me. And I want to be one of the dudes that is going to be able to just continue to bring that program to where his goal is for it to be. And so whenever he made that offer, I just knew that I wanted to be there because that's where I was wanted. I didn't want to be somewhere where I was going to be one of the guys in the background. I wanted to be somewhere where I would be wanted. And so once I got that offer, I was sitting in my living room and my mom was on the couch and I was standing at a big window just kind of looking out. And I turned around to her and I said, "I think I'm about to commit." And she was like, "All right." And so I told Coach Signee, I was like, "I'm ready to come to Wesleyan."
That's awesome. So you get done, you're off the phone, you make that phone call. How did you feel? Because I know there's a lot of stress building up at that time. It's not like, hey, am I able to? But now I'm going to make the biggest decision of my life here, coming up. What did it feel right afterwards, after that phone call and you hung up?
Well, kind of in the days leading up to it, I was kind of like nervous because I was getting ready to make this decision and I wasn't sure whether it was the right decision or not, but then once I made that decision, it was just like all the weight off the stress that I had was just kind of lifted off my shoulders from those last couple months, trying to get everything together, trying to get my foot in the door with so many coaches. It was just like all of that stress that I had was just lifted off my shoulders because at that time I knew that was the best decision for me and that was the place that I wanted to be.
So once you make that commitment, then there's some tough conversations to have with some of the other offers. Tell me about those phone calls. Did any coaches make it tough on you, or were they all pretty? They do this every day. It's kind of a everyday thing for them. How did those phone calls go when you told the other coaches?
Yeah, I mean, those coaches. What I found is a lot of those guys, they really do want you to succeed as a person. And so as I talked to all those coaches, I made a phone call to every coach that I had talked to so far in my process. And I just let them know that I appreciated that they were willing to believe in me, but that I'd found that I felt like Wesleyan was the best place for me. And at the end of the day, all those guys were, they're good people. And so they wanted what was best for me and they wanted me to succeed. And so we both wished each other luck. And I hope that all those guys continue to have successful programs where they're at.
So let's walk back to the travel decision. You mentioned that as kind of a pivotal decision. How did you decide where you were going to play? You mentioned you played for a team in the Carolinas. Talk about that decision. About how did you find them, and how did you decide that was an option for you?
Yeah, so my junior year, I was playing American Legion baseball, and it was kind of nothing was really working out. I was not really getting the attention that I wanted. And so it was like, I'm out here playing baseball every weekend, playing baseball during the week. I'm playing baseball all summer long, but nobody knows it. And so I was like, I was becoming a better baseball player at the time, but I wasn't getting any exposure from it. And so it was just like I was just trying to find something to do differently. And whenever our baseball season got canceled my junior year, it was like I was looking for some type of baseball to play because then it was like American Legion got canceled. Everything got canceled all at one time. And I had a friend who grew up in West Virginia, but he had moved south to Carolina, and he was telling me about all these opportunities that he was getting with this team and how he was playing in front of college coaches every game that he was playing. And so I was like, why am I playing here whenever I can go down there and be seen? And so I went down there and played the summer with the Carolina Rockies, but then during the fall, I was looking for something a little bit closer to where it would be easier to play during the school year. And that's whenever I was introduced to the Appalachian Aces. I've got a buddy who has been playing with them. His name's Braxton Hall, and I kind of heard about him through him. And so I got in touch with Josh, and Josh, he he talked to me a little bit, and once he kind of figured out who I was, that's whenever I got hooked up with the teams, and then that's where everything changed for me was playing in front of college coaches and playing with the Aces all the time during the fall.
Great. So when you look back, were there any particular camps or showcases that you went to that you would recommend maybe other players going to, maybe a team camp or, any events outside the travel baseball side of it?
Yeah, so it kind of depends, in my opinion at least, it depends on like your skill set. So if you've got, this off the wall skill set where, you're really fast, got a strong arm, got a big bat, you can go to all of the big showcases and you can get the attention from the college coaches there. So if that's your skill set, by all means, go to those camps and you'll get that attention. But, if you're kind of like you're a good baseball player, but you don't have all the high measurables like all those guys do, you're going to want to find a showcase or a camp that's more fit to you. You want to find a place where you're going to kind of be a school that you're interested in, so you got to know your talent level, know your measurable levels.
Sure. So if you've got a player or a family that's maybe middle school or maybe a freshman year, and they're looking to kind of get started in this, what advice do you have for players just kind of entering in the process?
Yeah, so just a piece of advice probably from me would be to start the process as early as you can. So because I started the process, I thought I was starting the process early, but in reality, I wasn't doing a very good job of starting the process real early. And so you want to kind of be informed, find a way to inform yourself on the process and on the rules of recruiting. And then once you do that, just get into that process as early as you can, because I kind of crammed my process into just a couple months, and it really didn't give me a time to enjoy the process. Because overall, whenever you're being recruited, those coaches are recruiting you to tell you that they want you to play baseball for them. And so it's really a time where you can, if you've got enough time, you can enjoy that process of coaches, you're being wanted to play baseball. And so that's your time to kind of enjoy all the hard work that you've taken and put in throughout the years. But the earlier you start, the easier that process is going to be for you, and the easier that process is going to be on your parents and everybody else around you, because you're not going to be worried about all these campus visits in, just a couple weeks of time. You got all that spread out. It's going to be easier to make those decisions, and it's going to be easier to get that process done.
So talk to me a little about the visits. You said you were on some visits with COVID. That's kind of made things a little bit difficult. But tell me, what typically happens on a visit, and how does that work?
Yeah, so a lot of my campus visits, they were pretty normal. Get to know the coach, kind of take a walk around campus and everything. But there were also some campuses where I couldn't get on because they were kind of shut down for COVID. And then there was a couple campuses where we did like a drive-through meeting. So it was kind of funny, we were driving through campus and there was a car in front of us, and that was the coach's car. And then we were following behind it, keeping up with him. And we were on the phone with him, and he was pointing out the windows, telling us what all the buildings on campus were.
So the coach's car's in the front and you're behind, and you're not in the same car, but he's on the phone. He's got the hand out the window pointing at different stuff.
Yeah, that was our drive-through tour.
Now I've heard of like FaceTime tours. I've heard of guys coaches taking their cell phones around, walking, showing guys stuff. But that's my first time of following a guy in a car in a cell phone with him pointing out the window. That's fantastic. Hey man, listen. Nowadays, coaches are trying to find ways to get it done. So, tip of the cap to those guys. On a visit, because you went on some actual regular visits as well, right? For someone who hasn't been on a visit, give me the anatomy of that visit. What happens? You start in the morning. Was it an unofficial or an official visit? And what exactly happened?
Yeah, so most of the visits, what we would do is we would kind of pick a time. Most of the time it was, just kind of in the middle of the day, we would go up there and we would meet those coaches. And most of the time it would start out, you kind of sit down with them, kind of talk about academics, kind of talk about a lot of the majors that the school would have, and you kind of talk about what you're thinking about majoring in and everything like that. And then from that point forward, it would be kind of a walking tour. You'd be kind of going around the school talking about, if you're interested in majoring in political science is what I'm going to major in. And so the coaches would kind of talk about, like, if you're majoring in political science, then you're going to have a lot of classes over here. But if you go into something else, you're going to have a lot of classes over here. And so they're kind of taking you all around all those different places you're going to kind of be during your next 4 years at school. And then, you're going to want to see a dorm while you're there, because that's where you're going to be. That's where you're going to spend most of your time for the next couple of years.
They always show you like the really nice dorm. It's not always like that when you show up, but they show you like this prime, really nice dorm where it's really nice. But sometimes, I don't know. But go ahead. So keep going.
Once you kind of get a look at those dorms, you're going to go around. Some places, they'll stop and you'll have lunch at the cafeteria. So for me, that was always pretty important, because you want to know what you're going to be eating for the next couple of years. Though you got to find the important stuff on campus. So the dorms and the cafeteria can be pretty important to you in the next couple of years.
What about players? Did you get a chance to meet with any of the players or talk with them during these times?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things was, while I was at some of those campuses, some of them, they didn't have students on campus while I was there. And so I didn't get to talk to any students. Some of them, the students were kind of in a rush while I was there. And so one of the interesting things about when I was at Wesleyan is one of my guides that I was set up with was actually a player from the baseball team. And so I was able to talk to him a little bit about their program and about kind of the program that they're building down there. And so that was an interesting thing for me, was being able to talk to one of those guys while I was there.
Get a little inside baseball on what the real deal was. So talk to me a little bit about the importance of academics and the role that played in your recruiting process.
Yeah. So as a student, I've got some pretty strong academics. And so I feel like that made me a lot more recruitable as a player, because, I'm not one of those guys that coaches are going to have to worry about in the classroom. I'm not one of those guys that they're going to have to worry about is not doing well in their classes or not going to class. And so the stronger your academics are, the more trust that coach is going to be able to put into you, and the more trust that coach is going to be able to put into you, not only while he's recruiting to you, but while you're there. And so coaches aren't going to want a bunch of guys that they're going to have to worry about while they're there. And so the stronger your academics are, the stronger your test scores are, they're not only going to help you while you're there, but they make college a lot more affordable.
So obviously baseball being an equivalency sport, you're only getting a percentage of a scholarship of some sort. When you got your offers, did they package, did you have some baseball money and then also some academic money? Is that how they package it?
Yeah, so I actually had figured out how much academic money I was going to get before I even got my baseball offer. And if you've got good academics, then that academic offer is going to be a whole lot more than what most guys' baseball offers are going to be for. And so you kind of have to think about what you're taking seriously. You want to take all your classes seriously while you're in high school, because that's been a blessing for me, is that I've got the grades to be able to help pay for some of my college.
And I really think on the coach's side, I think when they look at players, obviously they're trying to get the best players, but if they can get guys, you have similar players, and I've got a guy that I can put a really nice package together with because he's going to get a lot of academic money, I got a lot better chance of getting that recruit than a recruit that I can't give any academic money and I got to come up with all the baseball money on my own. So any recruiting stories along the way? Anything stands out to you that you might want to share with us from a, maybe staying in a hotel somewhere or a travel team story or anything? A good Josh Kuykendall story would be awesome. We love to throw a little shade on Josh from time to time. I'm
I
just teasing.
don't know if I've got any bad stories about Josh. Probably one kind of funny story about Josh was the first tournament that I played with the Aces. I was hitting pretty well, and so I was coming up. I was hitting doubles, and he was coming up. He came up to me. He was like, "So where are you from?" And I was like, "Midland Trail." And he said, "I don't know about Midland Trail." He was like, "What county?" And I was like, "Fayette County." And he was like, "Oh, okay." And he was like, "See, you're not," he said, "you're pretty good at baseball, and I've never heard of you before." And so I was just trying to figure out where you're from.
I tell you what, for him not to know. I mean, he's got his pulse on West Virginia pretty good. So it's rare for him. It probably did surprise him that there was someone out there that hadn't crossed his radar yet. But he got you. Eventually, he got you.
Yeah, he got me. Yeah.
Well, good, man. Well, listen, Cy Persinger, 2021 first baseman, right-hand pitcher, heading down to West Virginia Wesleyan, going to play some baseball in the Mountain East Conference. Man, I really appreciate you shared some really good knowledge with us today. Thanks for spending some time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.